opinions and observations, and then she took that in and used it to make her own decision. I had no expectation that she'd do it the way I wanted to, just let her hear my voice. So that's when I knew I'd really hit home, is with that particular friend of mine. There's another side to this story, though. It's not my story, but it might be your story. And these are some other stereotypes that people have of communicators out there in the world. So here we have some other images: a doormat, a scaredy cat, quiet as a mouse. These are often stereotypes of the opposite side, the more passive side of communication. And they're also not the whole picture. I'm an extrovert. It's part of the reasons why I communicate so boldly, is that I'm an extrovert, and I am surrounded by introverts. In fact, there's a lot of friends in my life and people in my life, professionally and personally, who like to joke with me that I collect introverts and then put them together when it will be helpful to them. I think it's really helpful for both of us. I'm an extrovert with a ton of energy, and that can be really draining for an introvert, which means I can sort of bebop around between introverts. And it's a little bit like me sampling flowers. I go and visit an introvert, and I go and visit another introvert, and I get all kinds of jazzed up from that effort. And then it means I know a lot about introverts. I learn a lot about their deep thinking and their ability to observe. They observe a lot, they see a lot, and there's a deep well of wisdom in their quiet. And we often miss it because we think they're not outspoken enough. On the deeper in there, though, there's often an unwillingness for quieter people to force their opinions on others. They say it's not my place, or they have a fear of social missteps. And there might be other reasons, but those are the two I seem to find most frequently in my group of people. It means that I tend to be the person encouraging people to talk more, and they tend to be the people in my life encouraging me to take a pause and choose my words wisely. So let's do that quick. Oh, no, we're not there yet either. I keep thinking the survey's coming up. It will be, I promise. So communication is a negotiation. It's a negotiation between another person's needs and your needs. On the passivity side, this is being subjected to an action without producing a reaction, often seen as soft, weak, or lacking opinion. Right? This is a hard place to be. It means that you're often in the passive role. You're often accommodating others' wishes and avoiding conversation. And what I've seen happen over time is if you're passive long enough, it explodes forth into a volcano of aggressiveness, right? It swings you the other way. At some point, it festers and something changes. On the aggressive side, this is taking action without concern for others' needs, and often seen as an attack, pushiness, or an instigation of conflict. Very often from the aggressive side, it's not intended that way, but is nonetheless the way it comes off. In the middle is assertiveness. This is boldly self-assured and confident, and it is often seen as firm but kind. So these are people who take the time to be bold and sure with their thinking and words, and also speak their words confidently. They know they have a place to speak, even if they're wrong. And they do it with kindness. They take into account how their words might land for the other person. So when we talk about assertiveness, we talk about being bold without bulldozing, and how to be quiet without self-sacrificing. All right, there it is. I knew it was coming. Here's the survey I'd like you to take. If you please go to slido.com, you can enter this code to take it and enter your answers to this questionnaire. Just so you know, I am seeing the Q&A pop up into the in the tool here, and I will get to those. I'm pretty sure I'm going to cover them, but I will get to them shortly. All right, looks like we're getting to at least the majority, and what we're seeing here is certainly a push towards passivity in this space. It's honestly not uncommon in groups of women. I've run this talk several times, and in groups of women, we tend towards the passive side over the aggressive side. I think I might be a unique bird. So there is a bit of that too. And you'll see a larger spread, or at least a more even spread, when you have a mixed audience. So we're going to talk about how to move that passive voice into the assertive space more than we'll bother with the aggressive space, but I want to invite you to do a little more deep thinking. All right. So I'm going to ask you to join me on Miro. There's a link coming to you now. All right. And you should see, yep, it did work. Good. And when you get there, you should see these 3 grids. And I'm going to invite you to think about the passive person. What do they think, say, do, and feel? And the assertive person, what do they think, say, do, and feel? And the aggressive person, what do they think, say, do, and feel? And go ahead and there's some questions here, some prompts here. If you're not sure what to put in those boxes, there's some prompts. And you're going to use the sticky note icon over on the toolbar. So that's the square with the little triangle pointed up, or you can type in on your keyboard when you're onto this board. Anybody having trouble getting there? Oh, let me fix that. My bad. Helps if I actually set it up right. All right, please click it again. Sorry about that. Sometimes I also mess up on this end. Thank you for letting me know. Click it again or hit refresh and you should get to this board. There's a lot of people in this session, so if we run out of room, just let your sticky notes flow out from the boxes. It'll be just fine. If you see something that you like in there, you can group yours with them. I'm going to invite you to start adding stuff. You can also make your sticky notes smaller if you need to. I see somebody put a comment note in instead of a sticky note. Nobody will be able to see that unless they click on it. So I would encourage you to use the sticky note icon, or you can use that by clicking the sticky note on the toolbar or typing the letter N as a note on your keyboard. All right, we have some really great ideas popping up here. Feel free to keep typing. I'm going to start taking a look at what's on the board and talking about that. So here's our passive folks. They feel ignored and not seen as equal. My opinion is not important enough, or they think. What if I'm wrong? They remain quiet, not to rock the boat. Their feelings are fear of rejection. Why bother? Keep repeating myself. No one's listening anyway. I'm not essential. Anxiety, unworthy, unimportant. Surely someone has already thought of this, right? That's a really scary place to be. There's a lot of anxiety in the zone of passivity. Resentment can happen. Yeah, for sure. And these are some things they do. They tune out. They follow, but don't share their viewpoint. They stay quiet even when they know better. They use text and email and, written word more than they do spoken word. Because it gives them time to think about what they want to say. They keep good ideas to themselves. And we don't want that. We know that innovation happens when everybody's sharing their diverse thoughts. So this is something that can really hurt the ability for a team to innovate and be creative together. And here's some things they say. Sorry, a lot. I heard some people are here from Toronto. I have one friend from Canada, and she says sorry all the time. And whatever you want is fine. I'm not sure. Whatever works for everyone, right? So we get a little bit of just sort of avoidance. What we're seeing here, the words we would use here are avoidance and accommodation is what shows up in the passivity space. If we move over here to the aggressive side, so these are the things they feel: insecure, mad at others, arrogant, frustrated, stressed, or anxious. Raising my voice is the only way to be heard. Right? That would be a belief that's sitting under the surface. They may be thinking, obviously, I'm right. I need the attention. They don't understand. I'm right, you're wrong. Why is no one listening to me? I need to be heard now. Perceived as bossy, right? I have certainly gotten those words too, bossy and pushy. Those have definitely come my way. They could say, they'll repeat things they've already said, have the same experience, do what I say, whatever's in their mind, no filter. So let's just take this over to a chat for a minute, because I know there were a lot of folks that sit on the passive side. Was anybody surprised to see insecure and anxious on the aggressive folks? Yeah. So here's the reality. I'm going to speak for the aggressive folks in the room. Feel free to add your voice to the chat if you are on that spectrum as well. We are actually really deeply afraid of not being heard and not knowing any other way to be heard except to speak it out loud and deep and hard. Now, it's not always that case. Sometimes it is arrogance. Sometimes it is those other things. But it also can be just as much insecurity and anxiety over here as it is in the middle. And what we're looking at here, the word we would use in the conflict space for this is competition. So these folks compete for equal airtime. Now let's go over to the assertive folks. They are ready for anything. My ideas are valid, but they might be wrong. I need to keep others' opinions in mind before I respond. They trust people. They stay calm. They're confident. They feel valuable and important. And here's some things they say. What can I do to make things better or to help? I agree with you on this, but let's talk about this. I've heard what you said. This is how I think about it. Generally they focus their words on behaviors and facts over attacks of personality or criticisms. They advocate for others. They listen to others. They're opening to hear others' ideas. It sounds like a pretty nice place to be. This would be the space in conflict. This would be the space of compromise or collaboration. Just a heads up, my cat has decided to enter the office and is starting to sing the song of his people. I apologize if you get any cat noise or in the middle of this talk. So you can see how there would be real benefit for both sides of the spectrum to come into the assertive space, and never mind the benefit it would have for them internally, it would also have benefit for the communities they're part of. All right, so let's take another look. Feel free to keep adding things there on the board if you'd like. I'm going to move on to something here. So when we communicate assertively, here's some skills for assertive communication. The first part is separating those observable facts from the stories that are going on in your head. So when these observable facts happen, I believe, that's the story in my head. I feel this emotion because of that belief and because I have a need or I value something in particular. And then a request comes after that. I'm going to dive into each of these, both on this slide and then later. So hang with me. So observations. For an observation to be true, it must be factual and free from judgment. And you want to separate the observations from the story in your head. If you get nothing else out of this discussion today, if that activity starts happening for you, you will be leaps and bounds towards moving towards assertive communication. Most of the time, it's our goofy stories in our head that mess up what we think will happen and what we expect to have happen. And all of those stories like I'm not valuable or I'm not being heard can start to get put down and set down. Feelings, for a feeling to be a feeling, it has to have an emotion word that does not assume intent. So I feel scared over I feel attacked, or I feel defensive over I feel attacked. Saying I feel attacked assumes intent of the other person. You're now assuming what was happening in their head, which makes it a story instead of a feeling. If you express your feelings starting with I feel that or I feel like, you're actually sharing a story as well. So I feel like you weren't respecting my time. I just moved into a story. If I said I feel unseen, timeliness is really important to me, and I know we've talked about it before, and I feel unseen. That would be a way to say, or I feel like I'm not being seen. I don't know, I went into a story there too. I feel unheard, maybe, right? So those would be ways to move into feeling spaces. Needs indicate what is creating the emotion because the need was met or unmet. So for example, if somebody was late to a meeting and they were repeatedly late to a meeting and you talked about it before and they still weren't showing up on time for the meeting, you might have a need for fairness or equanimity that you don't feel is appearing. And that might make you angry, right? Yes, Rena, that is correct. A lot of this comes from the book Nonviolent Communication by Marshall Rosenberg. And I plant a lot of my assertive communication in his style. Since you've brought it up, let me put those resources in the chat as well. So what you'll find there in the chat is a feelings inventory. So if you're looking for feeling words that are non-assumptive and you're trying to figure out what need your feeling is telling you about, those two PDFs can be really useful. And then the book is Nonviolent Communication by Marshall Rosenberg. Rosemary, it is like that. You are correct. So here's how you word requests. They have three parts. One is they have to be clear, concise, positive action. Would you be on time rather than stop being late, right? Would you be on time? They must be relatively immediately actionable. So as soon as the next meeting comes up, they could be on time, right? That would be an opportunity. And the person that you're making the request of can answer with a no, a yes, or a counter offer. If that isn't true, then what we're actually making is a demand. And if you happen to be somebody's boss, this is an important element. If you don't tell your employee that they can say no or yes or counter offer, then you've made a demand just by virtue of being in a position of power. So it's really important to tell people they're allowed to say those things when you make a request. Also, before you provide this kind of communication, you want to make sure somebody's in the right headspace to receive it. So make sure you get consent to talk about the thing that you want to talk about before you get started so that they have time to either clear their plate, clear their mind, or get to a place where they're ready to receive what you have to say. There's two kinds of requests. One of them is inquiry, and we usually use these. It's helpful to use these to validate or invalidate your stories. You're late, and the story in my head is that you don't respect my time. Do I have that right? Am I completely off base? Is there something else going on? That's an opportunity to find out more information. And then the other one is action. So would you be on time next time? Or would you text me if you're going to be late? Whatever the right request is for those spaces. Okay. All right. I'm loving all those questions that are coming in. Keep them coming. I will get to them, I promise. All right. So this is really the hardest part, this facts versus opinions. If you've not seen the movie Inside Out, Pixar film, I highly, highly recommend it. But I'm going to give you just a quick overview that shouldn't destroy the meat of it too much. In this movie, you follow along with the emotions inside a preteen girl's head. This emotion person that you're looking at here, her name is Joy. That's the emotion she represents. And she is they are in the deep brain, and they are talking to this little girl's imaginary friend from when she was a child. His name's Bing Bong. So Joy knocks over these two boxes. One of them is labeled opinions, and one of them is labeled facts. And now all the pieces that went in those two boxes are mixed up. And Joy says, "Oh no, these facts and opinions look so similar." And Bing Bong says, "Don't worry about it. It happens all the time." We get these mixed up all the time. Our brains are meaning-making machines. And so we'll see something happen, and our amygdala will check in with our hippocampus, and our hippocampus will go, well, the last time something like that happened, this is what the experience resulted in, and this is how you should feel about it right now. And the amygdala decides whether we should be in a threat reaction or not. Our brain is not always the best at deciphering what is real. It takes meaning as real as the things it saw and heard. So here's some questions that you can ask yourself to help separate out facts and opinions. Would anyone looking at the same situation see or hear the same thing? And what is the evidence that led me to believe this? And in that way, you can sort of tease them out, right? Here's the facts, here's the opinions. It's useful to do this because then you can go, okay, well, that's all I actually know. What do I need now to go find out so that I can determine what was really true? Okay. Consent really does matter, and it needs to be informed. So tell people your motives. This is what John Gottman of the Gottman Institute would call a gentle startup. Hey, I'd like to talk to you about something. I want you to know that I really appreciate the work you did coming up with that idea. And I also have some concerns with it. I want to give you some feedback on it, not because I think the idea is bad or I'm attacking you or the idea, but I want it to be the best idea possible. That would be a good example of motive sharing. Then you would ask, do you have time for that right now? Or when would you have time for that? And you would have a discussion about how to have that discussion later. Give all the relevant information you have, and let people know when you make a request that they can say no, yes, or counteroffer. So here's an example of what that might look like. I noticed something about our strategy that I'm worried about. Do you have some time to talk with me about it? There's a moment of consent. There's also an acronym that actually comes from Planned Parenthood. You know, we're dealing with consent in a lot of things in the world. So I'm going to share the acronym out loud instead of showing it to you. So the acronym is FRIES. So do you want fries with that? This is your consent check. Consent has to be freely given. So if you're in a position of power, you have to let people know that it's okay for them to say no to you. Otherwise, you have a coercion factor in play because you have more power. And it is very easy to tell who has power when you don't have it. But when you do have it, it is sometimes hard to tell. And just know that if you are seen as a leader in your organization, or you are more senior in the organization, or you're in their managerial hiring line, you have more power. And it is a good time to make sure people know that they can provide their own ideas without judgment. It has to be reversible. So let's say your boss comes and asks you to do a piece of work at 4 o'clock on a Friday, and you say, sure, and you're not really thinking about it. And then you look up and you realize the time and you're like, oh, it's 4:15. I can't do that right now. I've got to leave in 45 minutes and I've not done the other work I was supposed to be doing today. You should be able to go back to your boss and say, I know I agreed to do that by the end of the day, but I have this other work in front of me. It doesn't look like I'm going to be able to get that done today. That's a retraction of consent. And it should be a reasonable conversation to have. Now, I know not every environment is like that. I would bet there's probably some Q&A showing up around that topic. But that is the idea around consent. It should be informed. So I have to have all the information necessary to make a decision. If your boss comes to you and says, I need this by the end of today, and you don't know that their boss asked for it next Friday, then you don't have all the relevant information to consent and have a negotiated agreement. It should be enthusiastic. Now, this one's kind of funny. I don't know many people that are enthusiastic about their work. So I'm just going to say it has to be a firm yes. You have to really have a firm and confident agreement to do whatever it is that's been requested. And you have to look for that in people around you as well. And it needs to be specific. What specifically are you asking for? So when we talk about requests, what's the specific behavior you're looking for, or work you're looking for, or activity that you're looking for, so that it is possible to consent to that action. All right. All right. The other side of communication, once we get past talking and consent, this other piece is listening. And I love this little guy. My company's name is Liberated Elephant. I was very excited to find this little picture. And we want to have these big ears bigger than our body. Listen without needing to respond. This takes some practice. In the world of coaching, this is called second level listening. This is when you have such deep presence that the world around you disappears. You give really good eye contact, which can be done in a virtual world. You just have to look at your camera and not their picture. You can do this by making their picture small and moving it up under the camera, but give them some eye contact so they know you're with them. And pull the dog back in the fence. You know, when you open a fence for a dog that's, golden retrievers are really famous for this. You open a fence and the golden retriever is gone. They're out of there. That's essentially your brain. It's taking in all this information and it's off the rails going to think about other things. So you want to put the dog back in the fence, keep it on track, and focused on what the other person is saying. It can help if you're starting to get good at this, just starting to get your listening practices up. It can help if you take notes as the other person talks. Just let them know that's what you're doing, so they know that that's part of your listening process. Ask powerful and open-ended questions. This is another tool that comes out of the coaching toolbox. A powerful question starts with how or what, is not leading, and catalyzes creativity. So it does not start with why. Why will create defensiveness. So let me just give an example. Why did you do that? Likely what just happened in all of your brains was, I have to defend my idea now, or I have to defend myself in some way now. That little jolt of uh-oh that happens after a why question. If, however, you said, hey, what motivated that choice? How did you come to that choice? It has a feeling of curiosity that why doesn't bring. So highly recommend what and how questions here. Reflect on what you hear. So repeating and reflecting what you hear is a really useful tool for making sure people know that they are heard. Many times that's all people want, is to be heard. And reflecting back what you heard can be an incredible boon to good communication. And then accept their perspective as truth. If somebody gives you hard feedback, it doesn't matter if that was your intention. It only matters what the impact was. So accept the impact as truth. Take ownership of that. And it sounds a little bit like this. I can totally see how my words would have had that impact on you. I'm so sorry. It wasn't my intention. Would you like to hear what my intention was, so that maybe next time I go to communicate something like this, we can have a path forward that makes it possible for me to not to cause that harm, right? So that's kind of how that sounds. But you absolutely want to do ownership in this space. If you're somebody's manager, or if you're on a team with folks, it's worthwhile to understand how people do repair in their relationships. So for example, my husband likes to hear deep understanding and ownership of what occurred. Repeating back to him and rephrasing and expressing that I understand how he got there and that his emotions are valid is what he needs first before we can go to action. But for me, I don't need all that. I just need an action. I need to know it won't happen again and then see evidence of it not happening again. So knowing how people repair can be really useful in this arena. Okay. We also all have responsibilities in communication. If you have a responsibility to set the environment so that others feel safe to express themselves. This is true of everyone. We need to make the spaces safe for other people to show up without knowing that they won't have judgment. The opposite of judgment is curiosity. So if you find yourself thinking not so flattering things about another person, I recommend curiosity. Find the what or how question to get to what's going on underneath. And your needs. You have a responsibility to communicate your perspectives, feelings, needs, and thoughts, because no one can meet them if they don't know them. All right, so let's do another little survey here. It should have updated on Slido if you still have that up. I see a few of you teasing out some of the deeper tools, emotional intelligence, psychological safety, a couple of things like that running around underneath. Looks like empathy is our big winner so far. Honesty and trust, absolutely. So I don't know about the rest of you, but I've worked at companies that sometimes put trust as a value on the wall. We trust people. I don't know. I've never had somebody say, just trust me, and me actually trust them. Trust takes time. Trust is a consequence of living the agreements and values we have with each other, of listening and feeling safe to listen, or feeling safe to speak. So let's give a little call out to psychological safety. All right. So these are the things that are necessary for psychological safety. You have to own your mistakes. No crying over spilled milk, but definitely own it. You should frame your intent. You should get curious. We've talked about all three of those already. Here's the two additional ones that are here that we haven't talked about yet. One of them is give abundant gratitude. When somebody does something awesome and it makes you feel good, tell them what that awesome thing was, but you have to be specific. When you showed up, so let's say that same person that kept showing up late for meetings, you gave them feedback, you had the conversation with them, they agreed to show up on time, and they've been on time for the last 10 meetings. When you showed up, I just want you to know, I'm aware that you've been showing up on time for meetings. I can totally see that happening. I'm so appreciative. Thank you for hearing my needs. That is a really specific gratitude. It's not, hey, you're awesome. Thanks for being cool. It's a very specific behavior-based gratitude. And you want to give 5 of these for every one, not, I guess, negative feedback, but I'm going to call it redirected feedback. So the positive stuff, the gratitudes, they're reinforcing feedback. The other side, the negative stuff, they're redirected feedback. These are behaviors I don't want to see anymore. These are behaviors I still want to see, the reinforcing side. We have to give about 5 of these for every one redirective. What we do in giving abundant gratitude is we build social credit so that when things inevitably go wrong, it is easier for us each to give one another the benefit of the doubt. Social credit is incredibly important to having the resilience as a group of people to move forward when things are tough. And this last one, this is really important for folks that are in the passive state, is called self-soothing, physiological self-soothing. You want to step away. If you're getting flooded, something has happened, and I saw a couple questions pop up, what do I do with aggressive people? And then I panic and I don't know what to do. Here's the technique. So if you're in a position where somebody has become aggressive and you're reacting to it emotionally, call a break. Unless someone will die because you took that break, you can afford to take the break. And you'll just say something like, I hear what you're saying right now. I need like a 5 or 10 minute break. and then I can come back to this conversation. I got to get my head in order and around this in my own space and then come back. Perfectly reasonable. If that doesn't feel safe to do, you can say, I need a 5-minute bio break, and then I can come back to this conversation. And that's a nice way to get out of it if you don't yet feel safe to call the space for yourself. But take the time. A really useful working agreement on teams is the allowance for that time. The pause is really important. The pause is where we get our emotions managed so that we can have the conversation from a place without fear. Okay, so that's my first answer to that. All right, let me see if I can't answer some of these Q&As. How much time do I have left, Navadi?
You can take your time. People are really enjoying it, and a lot of us are going to go and watch Inside Out with a new perspective, even though we've seen it, but we're going to watch that again.
Excellent. Okay, so I have a couple of, I'm just doing a quick scan of the questions. I think there were a couple that were similar. There were some questions about what do you do if you're a woman and you're being, you are often told to be more assertive, or sometimes you're being told you're too aggressive. It can go either way. Get a buddy. This sounds like a crazy thing, but have a buddy. If you're being told to be more assertive, it is in fact beneficial to speak your mind and to have it out there. But talk to somebody else on the team, or maybe even that person who's asking you to be more assertive, and ask them to help you. Maybe by inviting you to the conversation. Hey, I'd love to hear what you have to say, and pointing and getting them to sort of prompt you to bring your voice to the table. And another option, and this works really well if you're in a male-dominated space, get the other woman in the room to repeat what you've said. There's a psychology thing. There's this really crazy video I saw on YouTube. It's like this person crazy dancing on the field, and everybody's laughing at them crazy dancing in the field. It looks like a music festival or something. Everybody's laughing at them. And then suddenly a second person comes up, and the comedy dips, and it encourages all these other people to groundswell to the person dancing. And now the whole field is full of dancers instead. And really, sometimes it just takes a second voice. Somebody who's willing to say, hey, before we move on, that sounded like a point we should at least understand more deeply. Let's make sure we've heard it fully. And you probably have some advocates in the space that you can ask for specifically for that kind of behavior. I feel like I'm getting overrun. I feel like I don't have room to talk. I'm nervous to speak my mind. I'd appreciate some support. Here's ways you could support me. Will you help? So those are some ways to sort of assert your voice more frequently. If you're dealing with a group of people that are really aggressive, so folks that are arguers, like competitive arguers, it is worthwhile to create a working agreement with them. And it goes like this. Let's say the last 3 meetings you've been doing some code design, or you've been talking about strategy or how you're going to work together as a team. I don't know how many of you are doing agility, but maybe there's a retrospective happening, and they tend to interrupt you or bowl over your ideas. That's a really common competitive behavior. This one is my favorite in a meeting, and it is an aggressive stance, but it meets the aggressive person where they are. You can say something like, are you done now? May I go? And that really points out to them that they've interrupted you. And now you can take your turn. Another option is to pull them aside for a one-on-one and just say, hey, when you interrupt me, I feel whatever the emotion is, frustrated, panicked, whatever the emotion is. I feel the emotion because I believe there's no space for my voice. And I don't know how to respond to you when you're like that. What do I do? And ask them, what do I do in the face of you interrupting, or in the face of that specific behavior? But make sure it's really clear what the specific behavior is, and really recent. If it was 6 months ago that they did the behavior, there's no chance they remember it. So make sure it was really recent. All right, I think I hit everything. Navadi, will you take a look at the Q&A and see if there's anything I missed? All right, we're going to do another Slido, and Navati is checking out the Q&A for me. And I'm going to invite you all to share what you're going to try in your future to communicate assertively.
So, I mean, there are questions like when it comes to being a woman, and then like Noel has a question. Can you please talk about the gendered aspect here, where assertiveness as a female is actually viewed as aggressive, or worse? Full disclosure, I lean far more toward the assertive side.
Yeah. So there is a gender disparity, and we often see that in microaggressions. Now, I will tell you, I didn't believe there was a gender disparity before 5 years ago. And I moved from normal corporate world into a company that had a really great diversity and equity and inclusion program, and had trained their managers really well on how to make sure everybody's voice was heard. And I worked for a boss who advocated for me in the middle of a meeting, who I said an idea and the conversation floated past it, and he did that stand-up thing. He stood up for me and said, no, wait, I want to hear what she has to say. And it dawned on me that the microaggression, in fact, had been affecting me for all of my career. It was a really sort of perspective shifting moment for me. There are places where you can work without it being seen as aggressive or bad. You could certainly get involved in diversity, equity, inclusion activities in your organization if they have them. And you're unlikely as one voice to shift the whole culture of a company. So you have some choices. You can stay and try and shift people's perspective. You can get buddies to help advocate for you in those spaces and talk down that sense of assertive, that assertive is in fact aggressive or bossy or pushy. Or you could find a place that supports you fully. Those are decisions you have to make for yourself. Your mileage may vary. So now, by benefit of being somebody who came from an aggressive stance and moved to an assertive stance, I don't have any problem being bold. I'm not afraid to be bold and to give feedback that's hard for people to hear, even when it's things like, you just gave me a microaggression and it's not okay. I would say those things. I usually say them one-on-one, but I would say those things. It's not easy and it's hard work, and you're not obligated to lift that emotional labor. It's okay to put it down. I don't know if that helped with that question. Hopefully it did.
Definitely. Yeah, and then there's another question which is similar, but it's for women. Do you have any recommendations for women who are often told to be more assertive? And I think you have been talking about that, but if you want to just, in a nutshell, just tell us.
Ask for time. One of the things I've noticed in folks that are more passive with their ideas is they're like caught unawares. Suddenly there was oh, I was not expecting that question or this problem or this challenge. You can ask for things like information in advance of meetings, right? I know we're headed into this meeting and we're going to be discussing this thing, but could I have some information about it so I have time to think about it before I get in there? And that will give you an opportunity to be prepared, and preparedness is a really great way to get confident. The more prepared you are, the better you can deal with confidence. If you suddenly get an emotional reaction to something that's happening, ask for time. Just ask for the time. It's worth it. And again, unless somebody's dying, you have it. Take the time.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like even with projects, like if you look at your backlog, then you can figure out what's coming up next and you can prepare for it for your next meeting. So I love that suggestion. Ask for time. And then similarly, Julia has a question about what assertiveness might look like when you're early in your career, when you're the most junior person in the room.
This is how I started those this is how I start those conversations when I don't know. As a coach, it's actually really helpful for me not to know what people are doing. So like when I coach development teams, I don't have any idea how to code. I haven't coded since the early aughts. late 90s, you don't want to see my code today. So when I go into those rooms, I do something like this. I don't know what you do. I don't know your work or your experience, but I had this idea, and it may be a crapshoot. It might be a wild guess. I might be completely wrong, and I'm open to hearing that. But I'd like to put my idea out there and just see if it applies in this space, and then do it. The worst thing that can happen is they'll say no. The best thing that could happen is they'll be like, oh, that's a perspective we didn't have before. And somewhere in between could happen as too. You could say your thing and they could say, any number of things could occur as a result. But you never know until you try.
That's true. And there's another interesting question. How do you navigate elephant in the room issues? So Lucy is asking this. When I see a problem, potential solutions, I want to spur improvement, but I risk shoot the messenger being in that situation and being seen as a problem for speaking up.
Ask for permission. I think I see a potential problem, and I'm pretty sure I have a potential solution for this, but I'd like to bring the solution to the conversation to make sure we're addressing that risk. Are you open to that information? They might not be. That's okay. And if they're not, it's not your money, probably. So they're spending their money on something that has a risk, and they get to make that choice.
Right. So Janet has a question. She says that I'm a fairly good communicator. However, when I come across someone that reacts negatively or attacks, I become passive. So any advice on how to respond? And I've seen a similar question in the chat with overcorrecting and stuff. So yeah.
Pay really close attention to your somatic system. So for me, I'll go to compete. When I get flooded and I perceive an attack, I go to defensiveness. I'm a competitor. I don't go passive. And for me, the first thing that happens is my jaw clenches. If you find yourself going to passivity, there's probably a physical indicator going on in you. If you see that happening, ask for the break. Take the break. I cannot encourage you enough to take the break. This is really the beginning. If you haven't done any work in building your emotional intelligence intentionally, this is really the beginning of that. Pausing, separating your facts and stories. Because right now, you only perceive the attack. They may have reacted negatively and aren't attacking you at all. And that's a story. So what is true? Take the time you need so that you can get to what's true. All right. Let me just take a look at some of the things that showed up on the board. We've got curiosity and gratitude and a buddy program, which is great. Using the model. Ask for time to think before responding. Remember that my perspective is valid. All emotions are valid. Not all actions are valid. That's the rule there. Acknowledge the situation at hand. Take a step back. Advocate for my needs. Looks like some really great things are showing up in the space, which is fantastic. You do deserve to have a voice. Yes. Are you done idea, particularly with interrupters, is really nice. Are you done now? Works really good with children too, by the way. If you have small children or teenage, preteen children, it works really nicely with them too. All right, looks like we're seeing some really great things coming out of this. Here's how to find me. Happy to connect. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. That's the best way to find me. And I'm open if there's additional questions anybody wants to ask. Please let me know.
Sure. Do you want to go through the remaining right now, or should they reach out to you on these questions?
I actually see it coming in chat I want to tend to from Cassandra. She says, if I may, I think introverts have been working around it for a very long time. The society is already in extroverted mode. However, during the pandemic, I kept hearing extroverts mentioning, I know how introverts feel going through, or companies making options for in-person or remote nowadays to enhance productivity. From my end, I've been hearing the opposite, that extroverts have to meet us introverts halfway. They absolutely do. I am an extrovert. It is important to make space for the introverts, and you do need to meet them halfway. There's a really great book. The title of it is called Quiet. The Power of Introverts, I think is the subtitle on it. And I forget the author. But it is a really great book on talking about how to make space for introverts. One of the challenges that occurs for introverts is they often get overlooked for promotions and raises and rewards and recognition because they aren't loud about it. It's quiet and under the curtain. Thank you, Cassandra. Susan Kane. Yes. So it's a really, really great book for getting into the hearts and minds and shoes of the introverts and finding ways to make spaces for them safe. All right.
I was Googling the book. It sounds great. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, it looked like you covered most of the questions.
It does look like I got most of the essence of the questions. How do you avoid overcorrecting?
There was one which said, how do you deal with a team that is passive about everything in every situation? Like everyone is just agreeing with everything, but we all are actually talking about different things.
So everybody's passive. Is that what I'm hearing there? Every situation.
Like
yeah. So usually that doesn't have to do with assertiveness or passiveness or aggressiveness. What that has to do is that nobody cares. Give them an inspiring vision. If you've read the book Dan Pink wrote called Drive by Dan Pink, he talks about purpose, mastery, and autonomy as sort of the keys to intrinsic motivation. Generally speaking, when you see people go to apathy, a whole team of people go to apathy, a couple of things might be happening. One, the environment isn't welcoming their creative voices. And when they've been creative, they've gotten their hands slapped. So what's the point in having an opinion? You're just going to tell me what you want me to do anyway. Sort of that kind of thing happens. So that might be a cultural issue in the organization. The other thing that might be true is they don't understand how what they do ties into some inspiring purpose. How does it help the world? How does it connect me to humanity? And that is the other piece. They're looking for meaning. And without meaning, you don't really get excited.
Yeah. Thanks for your book suggestions.
Sure. The other part of that question, we're all actually talking about different things. Write it down. If you've got, I know we're in a virtual world, so if you're in a virtual world, get a virtual whiteboard, have everybody write down the things they're talking about, what problem they're solving, and then figure out how to get all of that stuff dealt with instead of just the one thing that one person is talking about.
Thank you so much. This has been really, really insightful, a lot to think about. And I love the Mira board and all of that. Like, I think I'm going to go and read it all after this.
Excellent. Yeah, that Miro board will remain open, by the way. If anybody wants to go back and visit it, feel free. I saw another question pop up. If I have time, do I have time?
Sure.
Yep. It's at the top of the list there. If I talk softly, coworkers don't take it seriously, but when I project my ideas strongly, coworkers think I'm aggressive. My managers ask me to tone it down. How do I meet at the midway? All right. So I'm going to relate this to an experience I had. I was managing somebody who, so my boss used to tell me that my employee didn't have what he called executive presence. And I said, what is executive presence? And he couldn't tell me. So start challenging the message that you're getting. If I'm quiet, you don't hear me. If I talk too loudly, you think I'm being aggressive. What is the right tone? Ask your manager. What is the right tone? Tell me, show me, so I can emulate it. Because right now it's this sort of amorphous blob of, they think you should be talking a specific way, but unless they're specific about what that should be, it's going to be hard for you to get there. So ask for the target. So that's one idea. The other idea, if I talk softly, is figure out, spend some time with somebody you trust on your team and ask and just practice volume with them. Like go in a room and go, I need to practice something. Let's practice volume for a minute. Here's how I normally talk. It's really soft. Incidentally, soft is a really great way to get a loud group of people to listen if you can get their attention. but they have to already want to hear you. So that's the first step. Works really good with kids too. That's another one you can use with children. If you talk really quiet, they have to lean in to listen. But go like get a buddy, somebody you trust, maybe a family member if you don't have somebody at work that you trust, and just practice volume. All right, here's how I normally talk. It's soft. Here's how I talk when I'm trying to assert myself. Oh no, I should be right here in the middle, and sort of figure out where the volume is the right volume if volume's the problem.
Wow. That is such an excellent tip. I think I need to practice that myself. That's great. And Lucy has this question: what if you're considered aggressive, but in raising issues related to others, speaking up for those who don't feel able, not about one's own needs, but like it's for the others?
Okay. So what you're doing essentially is advocating. Make sure that when you're advocating for somebody, you have their permission to advocate for them, because some people don't want the attention. So watch out for that. Unless it's like a broad group of people, it's hard to get a broad group of people's permission. But for an individual person, make sure you have their permission before you speak for them. Generally speaking, you should only speak for yourself if it's a very specific behavior. So when I Scrum mastered teams, I would talk, and I had a behavior showing up on a team that was having an impact on the team. I wouldn't talk on behalf of the team. I would talk as a Scrum master how I was concerned. It was my worry that I was trying to deal with, not the team's reaction to their behavior. And then I would encourage the team to talk to that person directly. So sort of depending on what it is. If we're talking about advocating in the larger sense, you might want to ask your environment, your bosses, or whoever you're talking to about advocating for larger groups of people, what the right forum is for that. It might just be an issue of they weren't looking for that information right now. And you can sort of collect and keep notes on what it is you want to say, and then bring it to the right time. That's often what is occurring, is they weren't ready to hear that message. And didn't think there was a problem, weren't ready to hear that message, whatever that was, and find what the right form is. And by asking, I'm concerned about equality, or for people of color or other minority groups. I'm speaking a little bit for the US here, but I'm concerned about that kind of equality. Where are we having these conversations, and how do I get to be a part of it? Can be a way to start the ball rolling without saying, here's my opinion, right? So, and sort of invite them to start thinking about, oh, maybe we should be having these discussions. So that could be a way to go about it.
Yeah, I think with that, you've gone through all the questions, I think.
Okay.
You've really, it's really been insightful, and thank you so much for the time that you've given us. Really appreciate it. So thank you, Jessica. Thank you, everyone else, for joining us, for asking your really insightful questions. And do join the other sessions that we have after this, and even tomorrow. We also have the expo booths, an awesome networking feature, and the photo booth as well. So do check those out. And we hope that you enjoy the rest of your time at Connect Forward. Thank you. Thank you,
Great.
Jessica.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your conference.
Thanks. Bye.